All right, we're back with you, and thanks so much for staying on. Once a suburb NGO that quickly fashioned itself into a think tank for social democracy, the Rivonia Circle is now on a mission. It's been criss-crossing the country, so to speak, canvassing supporters' opinion to launch a political movement to contest the 2024 general elections. The group has been holding workshops in Johannesburg, East London, Mthatha, Mahikeng and Durban. And those attending workshops agreed to mobilise 1 million members for the Rivonia Circle Rise campaign. Joining us now to give us some more insight into the campaign is the Rivonia Circle Director, Songezo Zibi. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. So, it's not yet a political movement, fully fledged and fully formed, but certainly it's an idea that is circling around the organization and around your head in particular. Tell us how this idea comes about.
Thanks, Thabo, for having me. So we have been on a journey for the last 9 months in various forms with a program called Democracy Builder. And we've done about 35 of them, or 36, as of today, in 8 of the 9 provinces. And that was with their effectively civic engagement workshops. They last about 7 to 8 hours. We've done focus groups and we've done other forms of research. And we've learned a couple of things about South African politics and why voters engage or disengage with politics. What has come through in every engagement we've had right across the country is the desire for political re-engagement in the form of a political movement that is not affiliated to a specific political party, because political parties have a certain kind of culture. They offer people membership. There's a hierarchy. There's what is called democratic centralism, and it feels exclusionary to a lot of people. And the 28 million people that do not vote in South Africa have indicated to us, at least in sample, that they would like to re-engage with politics. And so that culminated last Saturday with a gathering of about 600 people in Johannesburg and 4 other centers around South Africa who took a decision to campaign for a political movement. And that is where the number of 1 million people that sign up for it came up. The Rivonia Circle will not be that movement, but certainly the gathering that it organized has become a catalyst for that movement.
Yeah, we've seen similar instances of gatherings where people come together to express their dissatisfaction with the political dispensation. One such gathering resulted in a political party called Action South Africa. There's another one now called Build One South Africa that also came from these kind of engagements. How different is this particular formation? What does it stand for as compared to all these other movements that have emerged?
When you talk about breakaway political parties, where someone who was in a leadership position in a major political party got involved in an internal fight and left and formed something they called a movement. We've been very strident as the Rivonia Circle, because this conversation, apart from having come up in the conversations we've had across the country, came up really seriously in a workshop we had for about 160 people on the 8th of October this year in Braamfontein. We insisted then that 160 people do not make a movement. They need to go back and consult with more people and come back having reflected on the idea of a political movement, so that we can facilitate a discussion about what that political movement would stand for, what it would be about, what it would seek to do, and what it would invite South Africans to do. So that led to the 600 people that we had over the last weekend.
Yeah.
And that conversation took place once again. And we insisted once more that 600 people do not make a movement.
Yes.
So calling yourself a movement doesn't automatically turn yourself into one. And that is where the obligation and the task to mobilize at least hundreds of thousands of people, up to 1 million people, to sign up to the idea of a movement is a very important precursor to actually forming a movement. Yeah. And we're going to call that the Rise campaign, because it's not a movement yet. It needs to be a campaign, and people need to go out and advocate for it.
So how are you going to entice the people into this campaign if, for example, your non-negotiable, so they speak, in these political parties, guiding principles have not yet been established? Because, of course, it's still 600 of you. You're not yet a fully fledged movement.
No, the guiding principles are actually there. So it was a very rich discussion this past weekend. For instance, there are 5 guiding principles. There's agreement that South Africa's constitution, and one of the pledges is to always be faithful to the South African constitution, is that we have a social democratic constitution. It has 4 values: equality, freedom, solidarity, and freedom. And the delegates agreed that integrity should be the 5th value that we add onto that equation. The pledge that was agreed upon by the delegates involved, most importantly, continuous community work to make a difference in communities every day, not just between now and the election, after the election, and into perpetuity. Because a movement cannot just be about securing votes. So those decisions and that discussion has already taken place. It is on that basis that people are going to go out and convince other South Africans to be part of a movement.
Yeah. How are you going to arrange yourself? I know you're saying the gathering happened in Gauteng mostly, with the 600, with 4 other centers. How are you going to arrange yourself regionally, provincially, etc.?
So one of the beauties of the way we've always conducted this investigation, these conversations at Rivonia Circle, is that we don't take decisions pre-conversation. The Rivonia Circle, for instance, will maintain its independence as a non-profit, because the work that it has done over the last 9 months has culminated in this conversation. The campaign is going to be a separate entity that carries on the work of building a movement. There is going to be, by the end of this week, a campaign coordinating committee, and we'll begin working with the 600 people that we had this last Saturday to start forming those structures, because it's very important to continue working with the people that were there. Because this was not an idea that was telegraphed from a long time ago. It's a conversation that has evolved. And so as we speak now, we seized with that work of putting together from that cohort a campaign coordinating committee. That committee will decide on a strategy, it will do fundraising, it will secure resources, and so on. And we'll build the movement from there.
Okay, so you've answered my next question, was where will you get the funds? Because we are told to set up these things, it is quite costly. Others were fortunate enough to use their family trust account to be able to set this up. Others have got international funding. Where are you going to look? You're saying you're going to fundraise.
We're going to try something that is very novel in South Africa. It hasn't been done before. If you're going to get 1 million people to support to what you stand for and what you want to do, I think for the very first time we're going to encourage on a massive scale South Africans to make small donations. It's more common in the United States of America and other countries. We're going to do a lot of it here. So we're busy setting up that infrastructure. As we stand now, the campaign doesn't have any infrastructure effectively. And one of the things that I spend most of my days doing is to try and make sure that there is at least that infrastructure to get going. We'll have a website by Thursday or Friday where people can sign up. We'll have contact details and so on, where people can contribute in various ways. Otherwise, we will rely mostly on the belief of South Africans in this idea to carry it forward in terms of resources.
Yeah. So much of the work, of course, that you have been doing around the Rivonia Circle was to educate people and to, in a sense, lobby people around the change and the reform of the electoral system. Now you're saying you're going to see and investigate whether you can be a part of that electoral system. Is that not a contradiction?
Absolutely not. I mean, the ethos that we've always driven in every interaction that we've had, that's why we don't call it civic education, we call it civic engagement. In a democracy, people must always be able to formulate their own political agenda. The things people talk about in our gatherings are not the usual things that get covered in the media. I was in East London last week, and the conversation for half the time, in a 4-hour conversation, was about child pregnancies, child mortality, cervical cancer, family disintegration, and so on. These are the kind of issues that South Africans worry about. And guess what? For the last month and a half, the country has been, at least in platforms like this, has been obsessing about the step-aside rule, who's more corrupt between Cyril and Zweli Mkhize and everybody else, and so on. And so what we find is that because we allow people to choose what they want to talk about in terms of political attention, we make a very visceral connection with people. We didn't expect 600 people at our gathering this past week. We thought we'd get about 300. But people really connect with what we're doing. And we're quite keen to let that continue and grow right across the country.
Now, you've set yourself a target. It should be achieved, at least from what I'm calculating, in the next 24 months. If it doesn't happen in 15 months, that you get 1 million people, maybe you get 200,000 plus, or maybe 500,000. Will you still go ahead?
Well, of course. Look, what's more important to us, by the way, is not the election. What's more important to us is that we start an ethos in South Africa of people in every community developing an ethos where they decide what they want for their community, making it part of the local political agenda and pursuing it. It's that kind of thing that makes a movement. But we have to recognize, of course, that there are issues which can only be tackled nationally. People complain about unemployment and jobs. They complain about crime. They complain about corruption and so on. So it's both local and national solutions. The more important thing is the civic engagement, civic activism, and the activism itself. I think personally that a target of 1 million is neither here nor there. As long as we can inculcate a culture in every province in South Africa where people decide, this is my country, I choose to take charge of it, and I'm going to contribute to the future that I want, then we'll have won if we can cultivate that culture.
Songezo Zibi, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much for coming on. He's with the Rivonia Circle, and they are embarking then on this criss-crossing initiative. They're calling it a campaign at the moment, but to culminate into a movement that will bring about change in the political sphere of South Africa.